Have you ever wondered if a mother's love can echo louder in the heavens than the voices of angels? Imagine this. Saint Teresa of Ávila, one of the greatest spiritual minds in history, a woman who conversed with God in profound visions, discovered a secret that transcends time. In the heart of her convent in San Jose, she welcomed a young novice whose family ties were broken because of a brother who had turned his back on the faith, becoming a source of shame for everyone around. The mother of that young man arrived there on a gray afternoon, her eyes red and swollen from sleepless nights full of pleas. She implored Teresa for an intervention that could rekindle the extinguished flame in her son's soul. And that's when the saint, with her wisdom sharp as a sword of light, shared something revolutionary. Not mere passing consolations, but a spiritual arsenal that saved not only that family, but countless others over the centuries. If you're a mother who has already felt your chest tighten upon seeing your child lost in the dark curves of life, far from the faith you once shared, this is the moment to pay attention. Subscribe to the channel now to dive into more pearls of wisdom like this, which comes straight from the depths of Saint Teresa's soul. She didn't offer rhetorical flowers or empty promises. Instead, she delivered 3 practical steps of prayer, drawn from her most intense mystical experiences. These are not tricks or empty formulas. They're tools forged in the heat of contemplation, proven by the master who unraveled the mysteries of the divine. And the best part, they work, especially when intertwined with genuine faith and the tears that spring from the bottom of the heart. 500 years have passed, and these practices are still changing the course of entire homes, rescuing young people who seem swallowed by the shadows of the modern world. Do you feel that your prayers for your children evaporate into the air like formless smoke? Have you caught yourself crying alone, questioning if the Heavenly Father truly hears the lament of a mother at the limit of desperation? Teresa lived it up close. Before being elevated to the altar as a doctor of the church, she was just an ordinary girl, daughter of a mother who shed rivers of tears for her during her youthful, rebellious phase, full of vanities and distractions. That's why her advice on praying for children doesn't come from dusty books. They're born from living flesh, from agony turned into strength, from salty drops transformed into rivers of grace. What you're going to absorb here is not a mere devotional palliative. They're spiritual shields and spears that Teresa herself wielded when afflicted mothers knocked on her door with hearts in tatters. 3 keys that she dubbed portals for hardened souls. 3 modes of supplication that weave invisible threads, linking a mother's breast to that of a stubborn son. But before we dive into them, engrave this in your innermost. The wound that throbs in you today is not a sentence of failure. It is your first cry to heaven, and it already echoes up there, even if human eyes can't see it yet. Every mother knows that instant when silence hurts more than a shout. It's when the boy who asked you to teach him the Our Father now laughs at sacred things, or when the daughter who went to church hand in hand with you prefers lazy sleep, claiming beliefs are relics of the past. Has it happened to you to wake up in the early morning with the sensation that a piece of yourself has been torn? Saint Teresa understood that laceration because she saw it in the exhausted faces of so many women who sought refuge in her convent, yearning not just for a hug, but for a spark of certainty that their children would return to the fold of the Good Shepherd. In her most confidential diaries, there is the account of Dona Beatriz, a lady from Alcantara whose firstborn plunged into ideas that challenged everything the family had built as a foundation. On a chilly autumn day, she crossed the convent cloister, her body hunched not only by the wind, but by the weight of an invisible morning. "Mother," she vented, "my boy was the sun that lit up my days. Now, he is the cloud that darkens them. He threw away the inheritance of faith, and with it, all the values I planted in him. What did I go wrong? Was my affection insufficient?" Teresa listened in profound silence, her eyes like beacons that pierced the layers of human pain, reaching the core of existence. When Beatriz's words ran out in sobs, the saint responded with a sweetness that carried the weight of a prophecy. "Beloved daughter, this storm that consumes you is not the final chapter. It is the dawn of a prodigy. The Lord allows you mothers to bear the yoke of your children's absence, not to punish you, but to shape you into irresistible advocates at the throne of mercy. A mother's cry for her offspring is a direct key to the compassionate heart of Jesus. Your affliction is not wasted. It is consecrated. And now is the time for me to show you how to turn that torment into a force that moves mountains. These were not just words of comfort. They were divine insights, harvested from Teresa's wanderings through the interior of the Spirit. She had grasped, in ecstasies that transported her beyond the veil, that a mother's suffering for a wayward son is one of the most potent supplications the heavens receive. In that same exchange, she confided to Beatrice a piece of her personal history. In my youth, my mother shed hidden tears for me. She saw my frivolities, my flights to the noise of the world, my indifference to the voices of the eternal. And, without my knowing, those quiet rivers prepared the soil of my heart for the great turnaround. The Father listens with attentive ears to the maternal lament, for it resonates in the same note as the anguish Our Lady bore at the foot of the cross. From that encounter onward, Beatrice was reborn. She saw that her pain was not a stigma of error, but a sublime call to a greater vocation, to be the ethereal link between the heights and the petrified heart of the Son. There is a darkness known only to mothers of lost children. That hour when you rise in the dimness and doubt not only his return, but your own essence as an educator. It is the assault of questions. Was I too harsh? Too lenient? Why do other children stay on track and mine veers off? Teresa navigated that darkness not only by guiding the visitors to her monastery, but by witnessing, in her reform of the Carmel, how even her spiritual protégés sometimes lost their way in the labyrinth of doubt. In a touching letter to a matriarch from Seville, whose heir had publicly spat on the religious heritage, Teresa wrote, "Do not interpret your blood's deviation as heavenly retaliation for your stumbles. The Eternal does not scourge devoted mothers by subtracting the spark of faith from their offspring. He allows these storms to lapidate earthly affection into something celestial. Your son longs for you to embrace him not only with arms of flesh, but with Christ's unshakable embrace, without bonds, without panic, with a hope that will not wither." Those lines fell like balm in the nadir of that woman's existence, when the strength to supplicate had drained and society's opprobrium immobilized her. Teresa understood that in the abysses of total discouragement, the maternal spirit draws closer to the divine than in days of joy. A mother's shattered heart, she noted, is fertile soil for the supreme prodigies, for when human reins break, when reasonings fail, when knowledge is exhausted, that is when the Creator bursts forth in fullness. She noted that the women who touched that threshold of apparent surrender were the ones who reaped the most astonishing turnarounds in their children's destinies, not through worldly cunning, but by eclipsing themselves and letting the torrent of divine love flow unimpeded through them. Are you crossing that darkness now? Do you feel your legs weakening in the battle for your salvation? If Teresa could whisper in your ear today, she would say the same she confided to those souls half a millennium ago. Your weakness is your framework, your helplessness, your scepter, your supposed setback, the prologue to celestial triumph. But the time has come to master 3 precise modes of advocacy that wrought endless wonders. It was right in that climax of the conversation with Beatrice that Teresa unveiled the first of her hidden treasures, the most unpretentious to the eye, but the most overwhelming in impact: the supernatural vigor of invoking the Son's name in supplication. Your offspring's name, she proclaimed to Beatrice, with a gravity that impregnated the cell's air with a sacred aura, is not mere sound. It is the reverberation of the Eternal's primordial call that wove him from nothing. By intoning in prayer, you do not casually evoke him before the Most High. You awaken the vital spark that breathed him into life. Teresa unraveled this in her most abyssal mystical journeys, where she perceived that names carry enigmas beyond rational comprehension. In the interior castle, she confides, every essence has a veiled nickname that only the Lord deciphers. but that vibrates when a worldly label is uttered with authentic love and adoration. The first exercise she bequeathed to mothers in the abyss was this: at the break of day, before the clamor of the daily invades, seek a serene nook, hold a crucifix, and aloud declare the Son's full name, followed by this litany whispered to her in ecstasy: "O Jesus, I deliver to you name, whom you know more intimately than I, love with greater fury than mine, and hold designs for him beyond my sight. May your spirit pierce him today. May your clarity awaken him. May your affection soften his armor. Amen." She emphasized that this should occur with eyes blindfolded, reliving in the mind the Son's face in tender age, radiant with purity and surrender. Know the secret of that potency? Teresa unveiled to the afflicted. By verbalizing the name in supplication, the Father does not catch only your intonation, but the reflection of his own initial invocation to existence. It is as if you were the bell that makes the term already inscribed in the eternal book of the living tintinnabulate in the firmament. She attested to unheard prodigies, matrons who, upon embracing this morning rite, dreamed of the absent, felt an inexplicable calm over the chaos, and little by little noticed discreet, yet concrete turns in the ways of their distant sons. No coincidences. They were replies from on high to an invocation that pierced the divine. However, Teresa underlined unshakable tenacity. Do not intone the name only at peaks of fervor or whim. Do it especially in the valleys of aridity, when belief wavers, when muteness reigns. It is in those voids that your prayer is worth gold in the Eternal's eyes. Persistence in crying out the name, even without the honey of consolation, erects an ethereal, palpable walkway from the heights to the earth. And, after sowing that initial seed, Teresa always raised mothers to a higher level, the august instant of consecration at Massachusetts. If you feel that Saint Teresa is speaking straight to your mother's core, share in the comments. Saint Teresa, guide me to intone my child's name with the force of intercession. Your story may be the beacon another maternal warrior needs at this hour. Don't forget to activate the bell for more lessons that remake broken homes. Upon unveiling the second spiritual arcane, Teresa's countenance lit up as if she sighted realms beyond the visible. "Daughter," she confided to each, "there exists a liturgical instant when veils tear, seraphim bow, and Jesus' core flings open. It is the elevation of the transubstantiated bread. And it is in that apex that your blood's name, raised from your spiritual womb, pierces straight to the Eucharistic heart of the Redeemer." That epiphany came to her in one of her most dazzling visions, where she cited maternal prayers ascending like golden beams in the hour of the altar's transfiguration. The second step she transmitted was this: attend the daily celebration, if the calendar allows. And in the precise second when the priest raises the host, close your eyelids and whisper inwardly, "Jesus, here is mine. Rescue him, envelop him, lead him back to you." But the core, according to Teresa, was to evoke in the soul the face of Christ on the cross, gazing at the Son with endless piety. Do not limit yourself to the sound, she instructed. Contemplate with inner eyes how the Savior stretches his arms toward yours, how his vital plasma rains upon him in a cascade of forgiveness, how his affection encircles the rebel heart's coldness. She saw that those who embraced this rite with conviction began to reap singular fruits. At Mass, notably during elevation, a palpable quietude bathed them, calming internal storms. Some caught glimpses of suns wrapped in glow or prophetic nighttime visions of reunion with faith. It is not daydreaming, Teresa reassured. It is the faithful echo of the eternal to a supplication woven in creation's most august instant. By offering the name in elevation, you insert the Son into the Lamb's chalices. But she watched that tenacity be the foundation. Do not demand instant fruits in the visible. Essence's metamorphoses demand seasons, like roots intertwining in the hidden before blooming. Plant the name in Christ's breast at every dawn, in every liturgy, without yielding to discouragement if the exterior persists unchanged. The artificer toils in the invisible, and his clock is impeccable. After sowing that second pearl, Teresa raised the afflicted to the most visceral and transformative enigma, the superhuman influx of authentic tears shed in supplication for a wayward heir. There exists a language the Creator deciphers without equivocation, the dialect of a mother's sincere drops. Teresa lived it in her own flesh in the most arid winters of her inner journey, when syllables fell silent and only a mute sob remained before the sacrament. Tears, she scribbled in a confidential epistle, are fluid supplications that gush from the marrow. Where a mother sobs for her son before the Most High, she empties her breast as Mary did at the cross's foot, and those pearls surpass any human eloquence. The third and supreme exercise she bequeathed was this: for 7 consecutive sunsets, light a white flame, emblem of the innocence yearned for the son's soul. Position it before an effigy of the crucified Christ or the divine heart, and release the sob without reins while supplicating. Do not force the flow, but do not repress it if it comes spontaneous. Some vigils will be deluges. Teresa prophesied to each. Others, deserts. Both are holy if donated with the heart. But when the salty runs, let it as mediation stream. Each pearl that drips is a dart that rends the heavens. She attested wonders with this office. She recalled with fervor Dona Leonor, matron whose descendant fled the home after renouncing the ancestral creed. In the 7 days of weeping before the timber, that soul experienced an eternal turn. On the penultimate night, amid the humid silence, she perceived the celestial mother's company, and a tender voice echoed inwardly, "I too poured for my son. Your drops merge with mine. He will return." A few months later, the youth reappeared, begged clemency, and embraced devotion with an intensity that stunned the clan. Why does maternal weeping hold such impetus? Teresa pondered in her scrolls, because it is the apex of affection stripped of selfishness. By sobbing for the son before the eternal, she does not beg for herself. She offers the broken heart as holocaust for another's redemption. It is the blood bond transmuted to its spiritual summit. But she watched. These drops must come with absolute surrender. Do not shed them to bend the divine arm. Pour them to align your will with his, not to rewrite his scripts, for the son to fit into them. And after the flow, rise in praise, for the listener has already heard and moves the gears. In weaving these 3 foundational spiritual meshes, Saint Teresa always clarified, to mothers avail over the intercession enigma few unearth. By practicing these rites, intoning the name, offering in consecration, pouring for the absent before the timber, you do not supplicate a casual favor. You weave an ethereal, tangible way from your being to his, a corridor through which celestial mercy can transit to the darkest dens. Teresa grasped this in one of her most vertiginous mystical ascents, citing how intercessions forged luminous channels between essences. In the interior castle, she unveils, she who supplicates uninterruptedly for another becomes an angelic sentinel in the Lord's eyes. Though the recipient feels not the shield, shadows perceive it and recoil. It is like casting rays of one's own aura over the obscured, erecting a supreme protection wall. She caught in legions of accounts how youths distancing from light, but whose progenitors faithfully wove these threads, began to gnaw inwardly with inexplicable malaise. Ephemeral delights lost charm, visions of eternal hues invaded dreams, or a void assailed them, evoking eras of belief. Teresa deciphered that this walkway operated in double direction. Grace not only reaches the son via your voice, but you intuit, by mysterious ways, his spiritual pulse. Many confided that, after initiating the rites, they awoke at dawn with urgency to supplicate at an exact hour, only to discover later that the son waged an invisible battle or pivotal crisis. It was as if the forged bond allowed dialogues beyond the barriers of now and here. But Teresa warned for vigilant guard of that structure. Every day, without the name and prayer, every Mass without the offering in elevation. Every night, withholding the sob the heights yearn to channel through you is like loosing a brick from the vault. It does not ruin immediately, but cracks. Hence the primacy of regularity over fury. A tiny but daily supplication is worth more than a sparse marathon. And, once the bridge raised, Teresa introduced to mothers the roughest yet essential jewel, celestial long-suffering, the gift of awaiting divine designs without panic or surrender. When matrons already mastered the three offices and the secret of the luminous way, Saint Teresa confronted them with the supreme test: cultivate waiting. Long-suffering, she declared with insight lapidated in decades of ecstasies, is not bearing the clock's tedium. It is trust in the eternal's tempo, even when maternal instinct clamors for swift solutions. It is belief that endures intact, though moons or years roll without evident traces in the sun. She knew that was the springboard where many fell, exhausted from crying out without apparent harvest. To infuse that superhuman long-suffering, Teresa evoked the Queen of Heaven's model. Contemplate Our Lady. She saw the child mocked, hunted, pierced, for 3 twilights. No sign that death dictated the epilogue, but her breast continued believing, watching, loving, and reaped glory's dawn. Your offspring may be in her own passion. Your office is to watch him with supplications until Easter's dawn. That analogy was no mere lyricism for Teresa. It was living theology. Every essence parted from the eternal lives a spiritual tomb, reversible only by the resurrected's potency. She observed that those who cultivated that Marian waiting reaped a serenity beyond the natural that elevated them in gales. When you await as she encouraged, you cease dwelling in perpetual affliction for yours. It is not indifference to anguish, but transmutation into peaceful vigilance. You continue supplicating, interceding, but with the tranquility of one who intuits the weaver at work, though the loom hides. That quietude was not inertia, but veiled action, the act of believing that the Father's affection for the Son infinitely eclipses yours. Are you battling the impetus of haste now? Tired of supplicating without echoes? Teresa would tell you, your restlessness is not guilt, it is flesh's pulse. But do not let it eclipse the tools the heights entrusted you. Every day you persevere, even without relief sweet, you echo the Lady in her mute vigil. And that vigil moves prodigies in secrecy. And it is about those prodigies incubated in the hidden that Teresa poured lessons on deciphering the tenuous signs that the eternal wove in the remote sun's core, even without fanfare in the exterior. The Lord does not operate as we do, she explained with endless patience. We start from the shell to the pith. He begins in essence's abyss and ascends slowly to the skin. Thus, the first signs in yours may be so subtle that only a prayer-sharpened maternal breast sense them. Teresa guided mothers to watch precise spiritual traits. If the one who mocked belief now skirts it in silence, without charges, it is a sign. If he inquires about existence's enigma, though tinged with lay doubt, the Spirit sows holy questions in his marrow. If he shows greater reverence for you, especially when your ears touch the eternal, the Comforter softens his armor. Those traits sprang not from affectionate illusion, but from spiritual tact polished by years of soul pastoring. There were more veiled signs she had learned to track in her chronicles. If the offspring slips in seeking perennial joy in old vices, empty parties, shallow bonds, fleeting delights, is the Creator digging in him a sacred hollow reserved only for him? If insomnias assail him without physical root, perhaps the Paraclete visits him in dead hours, instilling a bitterness that predisposes him to the turn. Teresa insisted on discerning judgment. Not all suffering is ethereal, but interwoven with a mother's incessant supplications, it becomes augury. The clearest trait, for her, was when the sun brushed the theme of finitude, the beyond or ultimate purpose, when an essence sealed to the sublime begins to murmur. And after the veil, It is undeniable proof that the divine wind labors in depth. No matter the skeptical or sarcastic tone, the act of questioning is the portal. A soul that queries the eternal, even in denial, is one step from embracing him, more than one that simply forgets him. Teresa exhorted mothers not to counter with sermons or dialectics, but with humble accounts of lived faith and, above all, denser prayerful silence. When the re-entry instant arrived, and Teresa had seen it always burst for those who persevered in the three rites, the saint prepared clans for the unpredictable. The son who reverts to the divine after exile is not the same who sets sail. He is refined. Essences that tasted darkness and chose clarity gain a thickness faithful perennials envy. Your offspring will reappear with meekness, recognition, and God hunger that will leave you speechless. Teresa mapped that pattern in dozens of narratives. Those returning from rebellion became the most fervent and loyal faithful in the family circle. But she watched for that threshold's risks. Upon catching clear signs of turnaround, the first impulse will be to hasten, fill with rites, demand compensation for lapses. Break that. The reverting essence is like a freshly sprouted shoot. It calls for light touches, not scorching sun. Let him set the re-encounter's tempo. Teresa's cunning here was vital. Many, in the ecstasy of finding, suffocated the return with excesses, provoking new flight. She preached the art of contained euphoria. Celebrate inwardly, but avoid the circus. Do not alert the whole kin shouting the metamorphosis. Do not demand public testimonies on the spot. Do not measure him against untouched cousins. Simply envelop, welcome, and supplicate for him. For the turn is journey, not stop. Her golden counsel for that chapter was living Eucharist. Upon seeing the sun embrace light anew, do not forget to render thanks for the silence winters. Those lapses were not futile, they were forged. The Eternal used his stubbornness to hammer resilience and conscious adherence. The returning prodigal values home as never before Exodus. And it is in that visceral gratitude that Teresa anchored her final lesson. Maternal affection, when raised to ethereal intercession, becomes one of the universe's most formidable potencies. At the apex of all her legacies on maternal clamor, Saint Teresa always culminated in the same revelation. A mother's love that supplicates tirelessly for the son transcends the human. It communes with the divine pulse itself. By intoning the name in adoration, by elevating him in liturgical apex, by pouring for him before the beam, you act not only as earthly guardian. You become the channel of the Eternal's paternal affection for that essence he too names mine. That intuition reconfigured maternal suffering, no longer just wound, but partnership in salvation's drama. Teresa grasped, in her personal ascents, an enigmatic symbiosis between the blood bond purified in prayer and the author's embrace. By delivering the Son, not in abandonment, but in full faith, your affection purifies so much that the Creator uses it as a direct vein of his clemency for that soul. It is as if you became the tender palms of providence for your own. Thus, the turnaround she witnessed were not just responses to cries. They were harvests of a dance between supreme love and maternal sublimated to utmost purity. But the greater trophy, for Teresa, was not the son's ostentatious return, but the mother's internal alchemy. One who learns to envelop the offspring as the Eternal does, without clauses, without dread, with imperishable optimism, sanctifies herself, regardless of exterior verdict. And a holy matron is the supreme legacy any offspring inherits, faithful or wayward. Teresa noted that those who persevered in these offices wove inner vastness, cardiac intuition, and beyond peace that touched not only sons but entire lineages across eras. Her final pearl on the theme was the beyond's perspective. Know that the bond with your son does not extinguish in the temporal. If you persevere in being consecrated mother, if you master divine love, you weave an ethereal knot that endures in glory. In eternity, he will praise you not only for the initial breath to life, but for reconducting him to the Father via your constant intercession. And with that infinite vision, Teresa sealed her lessons, reminding each that your love, lapidated in supplication and anchored in conviction, is one of the purest mirrors of the Eternal's affection in this veil. For such love, no setback fits, for it pulses in the essence of what led Christ to immolate himself on the cross. Thank you for watching this video. Leave your like and subscribe to the Living Hope channel on YouTube. Activate notifications by clicking on the bell to receive other publications.